Were you ready for changes?
Be more than
Hello
human.
and welcome back to the channel. My name is Joseph Carroll. I write under the pen name J.R. Carroll. And if you are a normal viewer of my channel, you might be like, Joe, where are you at? Why are you standing? Well, my office has been turned into a mother-in-law suite. So, I am in my chambers, so to say, and we got the setup here, so we're all good to go. And you're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about changes. And this was the book when I started reading Dresden Files that my best friend and anybody that I ever interacted with that was, in the community of Dresden was like, gotta get to changes. Oh man, wait till you get to changes. It changes everything. And normally, when something is that hyped, um, it almost never lives up to the hype. And you know, um, you know, as I've said before, these are full of spoilers. This was, I think this was like the fifth time that I've read changes, or something to that effect. But it's so funny being that person, right? Who's going through Dresden, and you're being told changes, 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 right? And then to turn around and be the person who's already went through it and watching booktube and watching some of my good friends go through it. One of my all-time favorite things ever on booktube is watching Sarah from Sarah Reads and her Dresden vlogs and her changes vlog, where she's kind of giving you updates as she's reading them, and her reaction to changes, one of the best videos ever. I will, if I can, I will find it and I will post a link to her video in here because that was magical. And then also a couple years ago now, I think, when Mike from Mike's Book Reviews read, I don't think he didn't read it out loud, but he read the last chapter or second to last chapter of Changes, basically while he was recording, and just seeing his instant reaction. These things are just magical. We start out here with Harry getting a phone call from Susan and being like, they took our daughter, and instantly you're like, what? Dresden has a daughter. Dresden has a kid. Um, and she's like, we're coming on the way. We need help. And Dresden goes straight to Max and starts throwing the shots back, getting a little tipsy. Mac interacts with him, says more. Mac may have said more in the one sitting that he had with Dresden here than he has said in the entirety of Dresden. Says, oh, these things are hard, definitely, what are you going to do? You got to be careful, Harry. And even Harry in that moment, not just us as the reader, but Harry in that moment is like, he's using full sentences. Who is this man? Mac never talks. Um, you know, and the FBI, gets involved because Susan and her associate are all on all these wanted lists. But with changes, just everything changes, right? They freaking and the red court, Ariana or of the red court shows up at Edinburgh in Scotland, and Kristoff is trying to act like I'm mending the one of the head wizards is trying to mend it and has her there. Harry shows up, basically busts open the door and is like, "Give me the girl back now." And then he even challenges her. He's like, "All right, we're gonna duel." And everybody is like, "Shut that shit down, Harry. No, we're not doing that." He ends up getting taken by Lucio to their little drinking room where she tells him this is where the wardens go when stuff doesn't go as planned and we drink until we forget about it. Merlin shows up. The Merlin, not Merlin, but the Merlin shows up and is basically like, yeah, we're not doing any peace talks. We know they're lying. We're going to try and take them out. And Harry's like, cool, whatever. You do that. I like that idea, but I'm going to go do my thing. Because I'm saving this girl, whether you like it or not. And so he heads back to Chicago. The Red Court, it's found out the Red Court owns his building, bought his building like 5 years ago, owns his building, and then the building ends up blowing up when they were investigating, trying to get, Martin and Susan are trying to get information out of the building. Building blows up, and Harry's like, oh yeah, they were in here last year going through the walls, and they said it was asbestos, but really what they were doing is laying explosives in the freaking building, right? And so, Harry tries to reach out to McCoy, tries to tell him, is afraid to tell him that he's got a daughter or whatever, but he's like, I need your help on this. And they're like, he's like, can't do it. We're doing our own thing. We can't do it. They end up fighting these things called the Ebes, which are like two really old vampires. And then this like monster, he compared it to kind of like a Loup-Garou. It's not quite as strong as a Loup-Garou, but pretty freaking terrifying. Like some sort of giant vampire like, monster. And Thomas, Molly, Mouse all fight it off and end up fighting it off. And then at some point, Harry, what is it? Harry and Susan are fighting the Ebes, and Harry's only way out is like, okay, we're gonna go through a portal, into the Never Never, and he ends up dropping right into the Earl King's hall. And first thing we're thinking here is, yeah, the Earl King said next time I see you, I'm going to kill you. But Harry uses some tactics when he drops in to get himself the protection of hospitality, which was pretty sweet. And then Earl King, they go back and forth with the vampires, the Earl King, and ends up having to be a duel. And Harry and Susan come out on top just barely. And then the Earl King's like, hey, you were the better hunters, so I'm gonna let you guys go. They get out, they end up back at Harry's house, and Harry's trying to get everything together. When he was hiding from the FBI, he ended up having to pack all his stuff away in the Never Never below his house, and we find out that because where the Never Never's different, depending on the spot and the vibes of the spot, it'll locate you to different places. Well, we've always wondered, like, even Harry's wondered what's on the other side of his apartment. Well, it turns out that there's a giant killer centipede that's been protecting his house. But he ends up burying some of his stuff there. Then, um, while they're sitting there trying to collect the stuff, a Molotov cocktail comes flying through, sets his whole apartment on fire. Um, Harry ends up trying to save the old people, falls and breaks his back, and he ends up at St. Mary of the Angels, and he's sitting there in the darkness, paralyzed from the waist down, and he calls on Uriel, and he's like, "Hey man, can you fix me?" He goes, "I gotta go save my daughter." And Uriel's like, "I can't. I'm not allowed to. I don't have that kind of power." And he just basically says, "I can tell you that your daughter is alive and she is yours. That's what I can tell you." And then he tells Harry, like, "You are her last hope." So Harry, and this is a big thing. This, like, being a parent, is so different from the first time I read this book to now, rereading the book over and over again. Is like, I know where Harry's at. And he's sitting there like, "I will do whatever is necessary." And so he thinks, in his head, he's got all these options. And he calls on Mab. And she's been waiting for this call for years. And he's like, "I am willing to be your winter knight. You have to give me the power to get up out of here and give me the strength enough to win this battle." And, he lays down stipulations. "You'll never make me raise a hand against anybody I care about." And, a few things like that. And she's like, and he was like, "And if you don't meet my demands," he basically tells her, "I have a fallen angel that's falling all over herself. I can call that coin back to me whenever I want. I can call on the Dark Hollow, and if I do that, then I don't have to ask you for anything ever again, and it won't be pretty the next time we see each other." And he's like, and he goes, "If I pick the coin up, I know Nicodemus will help me out." And she was like, "Well, you're spoiled for choices. Why did you call me?" And he basically tells her, he goes, he's like, "Don't take this the wrong way." He goes, "But you're the lesser of all the evils that I have to choose from." And she basically says, she's like, "It's true, I don't kill indiscriminately." you know, and then, they seal the deal. She ends up taking him to the stone table, and he has to kill Slate on the table. Just, cuts his throat. And in that moment, Slate actually, like, releases, and you can, like, Dresden says he can feel, like a, almost like a relief from Lloyd Slate to die. He's been tortured so horribly for years. And then he ends up, and then a funny, kind of a funny, weird thing goes on where he ends up, the way they seal the deal is, Mab and him, he says you can't call it sex because you can't really have sex with an earthquake, or a force of nature. But, so he becomes the Winter Knight. She gives him the Lianchi, his fairy godmother, to go help him, and he collects all the troops, and he even gets, from the Lianchi, he gets a gem. I want to say it's like a ruby, and he puts it in his thing, and it's from his mother. It's the one thing his mother actually left him, and Lianchi was just waiting for him to ask for it once he figured it out. And this Ruby gives him the ability, um, all of his mother's knowledge of the ways. They've always said that she could travel the ways like no one else. Well, this Ruby has, it's basically a roadmap of everywhere she's ever been and exactly how to do it. Like it tells them steps, like how many steps to go to here, and then you turn right. Like it gives you the whole blueprint, which makes Harry's basically fast movement through places even faster. But they have to go to Chichen Itza, and he takes the swords with him. He's bringing pretty much everybody except I don't think like of all the people we know to be his associates, he's bringing them all except for the Alphas. I don't think the Alphas were not involved in this at all. But he's got Thomas, Leah, he's got Karen, Susan, Martin, Mouse. He's got them all, and they were gonna try and sneak in there. But this vampire guy, this guy's getting chased by a vampire, runs out of the forest, or and the vampire sees him and screams. They kill him, but it was too late. Now it's a frontal assault, and Harry's like, we just gotta go. We gotta go. He runs in there. They've stated that Chichen Itza is like a power well where ley lines, combine, and he taps into that ley line and just boom, just kills like 100 or 200 vampires. But they had that kind of planned out. They knew he was going to attack them. So that was mostly just cannon fodder, just low-level vampires. But some of the coolest scenes come up when they try to do some talking. And Harry calls out Eric. I want to keep saying her name is Ariana, but I'm probably wrong on that. I don't know why it's not sticking to my mind. But the Red King says, "Yeah, go ahead and duel her," because we've figured out that she is trying to dethrone him because he has this bloodlust that is not desirable. Like he's addicted. He can't hardly control himself. But Harry does end up dueling her and kills her. But then, as always, the Red King, basically backstabs him and says, "Nope, that's not. I'm not sticking to my word here." And then they just assault the pyramid where Maggie, his daughter, is being held at the top. And one of the coolest scenes in all of Dresden is when Karen wields the sword Amaracus, and just starts. She like God or Michael speaks through her and says, this is retribution for what you did to the Mayans and all these people for all these years. And she's just cutting through vampires like a hot knife through butter. Harry ends up at the top and ends up dueling wills against the Lords of Outer Night and the Red King. He's got Harry crushed down, but the Alanshi gave Harry and Susan special clothing. The thing that Susan has can make her invisible, and she sneaks in behind and wields the other sword, Michael's sword, and that's all they can see. She's invisible, but they can see the light from the sword. So he thinks, "Oh, is that the real Kukulkan? Is that the real god?" Because he's pretending to be a god. He's just a really super old vampire. But so he's like, "Oh, is that a god?" And then Martin rolls in with the machete, and everyone thinks, he's sneaking up behind the Red King. He's gonna kill him. Well, he ends up freaking kicking Susan. Her veil falls, and Martin's like, "Ha! I've been a double agent this whole time. I've worked with the vampires for 150 years. You know, uh, this has, been all business. You should have seen it coming. And then uh, the Lianshi, basically was hiding in as one of the Lords of Outer Night and just starts waylaying on these guys. And then Harry's yelling to Susan, ask Martin, who did he, basically, did he set up for her daughter to be taken? And he's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I did. And and then she just bites his throat out. And um, and then of course she's taken in the lifeblood. She starts becoming a vampire. Now the big thing about this whole thing about Chichen Itza is that they were going to sacrifice Harry's daughter on the altar, and it was going to cause a bloodline curse that would kill her, then kill her father, mother, and then kill her grandfather and everything. And in this whole thing, we figured out that the goal was actually to get to dun 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 Ebenezer, and it turns out Ebenezer is Harry's grandfather. And that was like another, like, first time you read it, you're like, what? Just everything is changing. So we figured out that it causes a bloodline curse if you are, killed on this table. So Susan had ripped out Mark's throat. She's turning into a vampire. So it's like, all right, you kill the youngest member of the family, and that rockets all the way to the oldest living member. So Dresden's like yelling at her, you're the youngest vampire. Do it. And she's like, I can't control myself. I can't do it. And Harry fights his way over to her. And in one of the most rip your heart out moments in fantasy, Harry tells her that he loves her, and he's kissing her, and as he's giving her a kiss, he slits her throat. And mutually she knows that's what's happening. She knows that he has to do this, and she dies there and kills all of the Red Court. The Red Court just vanishes like that. Just, they all die. And then the people at the Fellowship of St. Giles, with their vampire half, dies away, and they become human again. And it was just, some of the coolest things, like as they were running up, the Grey Council actually ended up showing up to do battle as Harry was trying to make his way up. So you had Odin. We figure out Donon Vadarang is actually Odin, and he's with Ebenezer. And I don't think you get to see. Those are the only two we know now that are in the Grey Council. But Harry ends up going back, and his house, he has nothing. His car is destroyed. His house is destroyed. So he's like just contemplating life. What is he going to do with Maggie? He's told Karen to take care of Maggie while they were in Chichen Itza. It's like, get her somewhere safe. I can't take care of her. Don't tell me where she's at. But then they meet on Thomas's boat, and they basically kind of agreed, all right, we're gonna kind of hook up. She's like, meet me, or we'll meet back at this time. Let's all get, so Harry, takes a shower and everything, and he's getting, getting ready, and he steps out onto the deck, and he's just like thinking about, thinking about his life and everything. And then all of a sudden he hears a noise, and he looks behind him, and he's like, what's that red spot on the boat? And then he looks down, and he's like, why did I pick the shirt that has the bullet hole in it? And then he falls into Lake Michigan and dies. I mean, and we're sitting here like, what in the hell happened? Harry. But this is my favorite fantasy book of all time. Hey, if you've made it this far, hit the subscribe button, throat punch that like button, and let me know what you thought. Did it blow your mind like it did mine? And let's talk about it. And I'll see you in the next one.